Daniel, the 3rd chapter, and we will consider verses 1 through 30, but we're not going to read that many. I want you to follow me along as we start with verse 10. Thou, O king, hast made a decree that every man that shall hear the sound of the cornet, the flute, the harp, the sackbut, the psaltery, the dulcimer, and all kinds of music, shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoso falleth not down and worship, that he should be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not regarded thee. They serve not thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Skip down to verse 16. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thy hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. I want to talk about how to stand under pressure. I hasten to say that we are living in times of pressure. Time will not allow me to talk about all of the areas that pressure lies, but I'm only going to talk about 2. Our family and our church. Family, it is the pressure in our hearts, for it is a challenge not to be able to visit our parents, our grandparents, brothers and sisters and nephews, our cousins. It is a burden in our hearts not to be able to do these things, yet we know for the health of our families, visitation is not a safe practice. Then we have the challenge of wearing a face mask wherever and whenever we are out in public. That's a challenge to some people, especially to our teenagers. But we also know that not wearing a face mask is a reckless disregard for the health and safety of other people. And then we talk about the area of our church. For it is a challenge to all religious groups, Catholic, Methodist, Presbyterian, Kojic, Baptist. It is a challenge for all groups that gather together like we are today to meet and practice social distance. It's a challenge to our church family to pull together when we're not together. And to maintain that closeness that we so much enjoy. And to keep our unity. And to maintain our spiritual growth. For instance, who is current in their Bible reading? And then we talk about being faithful to our commitment to the church. These are a few areas where pressure is. Nevertheless, we must relentlessly stand if we are intended to come out of this stronger and better than we were going in. So, and although some of us, when we started this arrangement, we thought it was just going to be a short sprint, but it turned out to be a marathon. Nevertheless, I want you to stay with me. I want you to remain faithful to the church. Isn't it so? And then, by the grace of God, this too shall pass. I heard James Cleveland say that. This too shall pass. So like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, in order for us to stand under the pressure of our times, we must do some things as they show us. Number one, we must take a serious look at our core values. You hear what I said? I said we must take a serious look at our core value. Like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that there should be some principles in our lives that we will not violate. I said there ought to be some principles in your life that you will not violate. There ought to be some things that you just won't do. For instance, you won't cheat. You won't cheat God. You won't steal. You will not falsely accuse anyone. You will not curse thy mother or thy father. You will not give your body over to drugs. It is the temple of God. So then they, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they had some principle that they had to live by. They were guided by their principle. For they remember reading in the book of Exodus 20 and 3, number 1 in the 10th commandment. They remember reading that thou shalt have no other God before me. And this principle, it was in their hearts. You understand what I'm talking about? And I'm saying, if you have been born again, there ought to be certain principles that are in your heart that guide you day by day. Isn't it so? And not only that, we must also do something else. As we see in the text, we must not have a fear of death. If they were afraid to die, they never would have made it to the fiery furnace. We wouldn't have this story if they were afraid to die. As long as you have fear, that fear is the marking point as to when you will not be able to stand. You sometimes in our lives, we must come to the point that we are no longer afraid of death. Isn't it so? No longer afraid to die. This is why certain diseases terrify us. We know it could lead to death. And we must come to the point to put principle over death. That's what they did. They had principle that they lived by, and they put principle over death. And we must come to the point that we make death give way to love. And that we can join Paul in saying, for me to live is Christ, and for me to die is gain. I wonder how many today are afraid of death. How many would have broken when they came to this point? You bow down, or you going into the fire furnace. I want to tell you what Jesus said. Fear not them which kill the body, but are not able to kill the soul. But rather fear him which is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. That's who you ought to fear. And when God was given the last revelation, finishing up the Bible, he told the saints, be thou faithful unto death. It didn't say be faithful until you're threatened by death. It means be faithful through death. Be faithful. And this is where we have to come today as Christians, as children of God. We must face life as a whole. For death is a part of life. And we must come to that end. And having done these things, we'll be able to stand under the pressure of this old world. After telling the king that if God delivered them or not, they are still not going to bow. After telling the king, if you marry me or not, I'm still not going to disregard my principle. Huh? After telling the king, if you give me money or not, I am still not going to violate my principle. If I have to live outdoors, there are some things in my heart that won't let me do certain things. No matter where I end up, I just can't do it. This Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they just couldn't do it. They told the king, we will not bow down. And the king became enraged. And he commanded that they would heat the furnace 7 times hotter than it ought to be. And then they brought these men forward on this grand occasion. Everybody who was somebody, they were there. And they had on their best clothes. They had on their coats, their hosen and their hats, and their outer garment. And they bound them and cast them into the fiery furnace. The fire was so hot until the men that threw them in, the flame reached out and got them. It was hot. And then Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego, they fell down to the bottom of the furnace. And then something happened. Something happened. The king jumped up in astonishment. And he asked the counselor, he said, now tell me something. How many men did we cast in? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He said, I count 3. The counselor said, yes, O king. We did cast in 3. King said, something is going on here. Because I see 4 men walking around in the fire. And the 4th man looks like the Son of God. He came to the mouth of the furnace and he called them, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I see you in the fire. I see you all walking around. Come on out the furnace and come here. We want to examine you. And they walked up on them, and the clothes looked like they just came from the cleaners. And they got close enough to look at their heads. Their hair was not seen. And somebody said, well, let's smell them. They took a smell and they couldn't even smell the smoke. And I heard the king say, blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, because their God was able to deliver them from the furnace. And then he said something else. If I hear anybody talking about the God of these Hebrew boys, if I hear you blaspheming, you're going to be cut up in pieces, and we're going to tear your house down all the way to the ground. Let me close here now. Yes, Lord. But I want to tell you, be not dismayed. Whatever betide you, God will take care of you. Beneath his wings, love abide. He will. I said he will. As we stand under the pressure, I still say he will. God bless you. We're going to extend the invitation. Maybe you are under the pressures of the world. God never intended for you to carry life by yourself. Jesus said, come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I give you rest.